Chapter 23. A Dancer's Footprints. "Nancy! Nancy!" Ned cried frantically as he ran into the woods, followed by the two policemen. He had not gone far when the tracks of the automobile stopped. This could mean only one thing. The car had been backed out again. Nancy's kidnappers only drove in here temporarily, probably to avoid some passing car, he said to the officer. Donovan laid a hand on the young man's shoulder. "Don't be so sure of that," he said. "Somebody might have had a flat tire and pulled in here to fix it." Ned took heart, and they pushed farther along the road. After a few hundred yards, they came to a second trail that led into the woods. Hopefully, the searchers turned in and followed it. Suddenly, the flashlight beam picked up the outline of an automobile. But upon closer inspection, they found it to be just a rusted car that apparently had been junked some time ago. "Another false lead," said Ned, discouraged. He and the officers retraced their steps and continued the search. Ned noticed that the road was turning almost back on itself. It occurred to him that if Renee had kidnapped Nancy, he could have hidden her and the car temporarily, then taken a shortcut back through the woods and easily reached the lane to his farmhouse as quickly as he did. "Nancy may be close by," he concluded excitedly. At this moment, the three searchers discovered another spot where a car had been driven in among the trees. The trail was clearly marked over the ruts and humps in the terrain. Suddenly, in the flashlight's beam, they saw a car a short distance beyond. "There it is!" Ned shouted, pointing toward a green sports car. "That's mine! Nancy! Nancy!" He ran ahead, stumbling now and then on the rough, broken ground. Reaching the car, he yanked open the door. On the floor in the rear seat lay Nancy, bound and gagged. Quickly, Ned picked her up and removed the gag. "Oh, Nancy, are you all right?" he asked fearfully. "Yes, Ned," she said in a daze. The two policemen helped remove the bonds and then asked what had happened to her and who her abductor was. After several deep breaths, she was able to tell her story. "I'll catch Renee if it's the last thing I do," Ned vowed. "I wish you would," said Nancy ruefully, as she hobbled around to restore circulation to her arms and legs. "This is a fine end to my plan for a nice ride and dinner that we were going to have this evening," said Ned. "I'm sorry, Ned," Nancy said. Ned suggested that they start for home at once and stop in a restaurant on the way. "But I'm a sight," she protested. "I couldn't go anywhere to dinner. I'll tell you what, there must be some food at the farmhouse. Let's all go up there and help ourselves. Then we can do a little investigating in the house afterward." Ned shook his head in amazement. Turning to the two equally stunned policemen, he said, "Nancy Drew never gives up until she has solved a case." They all climbed into the car, and Ned drove it back to the farmhouse. Donovan got in touch with Captain Crane over the police car radio and made a report. The captain ordered him to stay overnight at the farmhouse as guard. The other officer was to return to headquarters as soon as the house had been thoroughly investigated. In the meantime, Ned had insisted that Nancy take it easy while he rummaged around for food. But she insisted that what she needed was exercise. So together they opened several cans of food they found on a shelf and warmed the contents. Donovan and the other policeman, who had eaten earlier, made an inspection of the grounds. The meal, though simple, proved to be hearty. When Nancy and Ned finished eating, Nancy declared that she was going to make her own investigation of the premises for clues. Reasoning that if the Fontaines had been held prisoners, it would not have been on the first floor, she went upstairs. Officer Donovan, who came in at that moment, followed her. Nancy turned on the light in one of the bedrooms, then asked to borrow the officer's flashlight. "All right," Donovan said, handing it to her. "I'd like to watch a girl detective work. But would you mind telling me what you're going to do with my flashlight?" Nancy said that if the missing Fontaines had been at the house, either as prisoners or of their own volition, Hélène probably would have practiced her dancing, and she was searching for signs of this. "Ballet dancers," Nancy explained, "never let a day go by without working. They have to keep their muscles in perfect condition." The police officer smiled as Nancy went from bedroom to bedroom, getting down on her hands and knees to examine the floor carefully. Finally, she was rewarded in her search. "Look here!" she cried excitedly. "This floor has been waxed recently. And see these long slide marks and rounded dents in the waxed surface? These were made by toe slippers." Said Donovan. "Guess you're right. But say, can these folks dance without music?" "Why, certainly," Nancy said. Just then, Ned walked into the room. "I have a clue for you, Nancy," he said, smiling in a proud manner. The young man said that he had called the telephone company and asked for the name of the party under which the farmhouse phone was listed. Since it was after hours, he had had a little difficulty, but finally got the information. "Does the name Raymond Bull mean anything to you?" he asked. "Indeed it does," Nancy replied excitedly. "He's the Frenchman who was on the plane from New York to River Heights that Mr. Koff and I were on. Dad got his name from the stewardess." "Do you suppose it's an alias of Renee's?" Ned asked. "It could be," Nancy said. Officer Donovan had been looking on and now asked for an explanation. Quickly, Nancy told him the various facts of the case, which he had not already heard at headquarters. The young people continued their search of the house, but found no clues that would indicate the destination of the fugitives or give any inkling of their plans. "We may as well go," Ned told Nancy. "Maybe by morning the police will have some good news for us." "I hope so," Nancy replied. They said goodnight to Donovan and wished him luck. Then they set out for Brandon, taking the other officer back to headquarters. When they reached there, Nancy suggested that she and Ned stop in and find out from Captain Crane whether Mrs. Judson had talked or whether she had had any suspicious callers. The captain shook his head when Nancy questioned him. "I haven't one bit of news for you yet," he said. "We've tried to get Mrs. Judson to talk, but she refuses to answer any questions." "Did you search her handbag and other personal belongings?" Nancy asked. "Oh, yes," Captain Crane replied. "One of our matrons handled that, but she found nothing to give us any clue to Mrs. Judson's home address or her family." The captain went on to say that he had sent out a general alarm for the black sedan containing the 4 suspects. No report had come in that the car and its occupants had been found. "I'll let you know, Miss Drew, if anything turns up," Captain Crane promised. It was nearly midnight when she and Ned reached River Heights. Because of the day's excitement, Nancy was very weary and slept late the following morning. As she awakened, the young sleuth found herself looking up into the faces of Hannah Gruen, Bess, and George. The girls were neatly clad in white blouses and blue pedal pushers. "Well, sleepyhead," George said, seating herself on the edge of Nancy's 4-poster. "Tell us everything." The girls listened attentively, but both of them chuckled as Hannah brought in breakfast on a tray. "The idle rich," George declared. "Breakfast in bed, no less. But if anyone deserves it, you certainly do." When Nancy finished her breakfast, George said, "There are no dancing classes today for you 2 girls. Nancy, is there anything on the detective calendar we can help you with?" Nancy smiled. "I'm heading back for that farmhouse in Brandon. This time, I'm going to search the old barn from top to bottom. Want to go along?" "Wouldn't miss it," George declared. But Bess was hesitant. "Those kidnappers may come back," she warned. Then what would we do?" "There's a policeman on guard," Nancy said, and added impishly as she hopped out of bed, "He's big and strong and will protect us." As soon as she had showered and donned a pair of jeans and a plaid cotton blouse, the three girls set off. When they reached Renee's place, Officer Donovan welcomed Nancy with an expansive smile. "Nothing has happened since you left," he said, "but now that you're here, maybe things will start to pop." Nancy introduced her friends and explained that the three girls were going to search the barn for clues. They entered the rickety building and found that all the main floor contained were a few pieces of obsolete machinery. Nothing of interest came to light. "Hayloft next," said George. Working in various locations of the loft, they began pulling the loose hay apart. There was silence for several minutes. Then Nancy exclaimed, "Girls, here's a briefcase hidden deep in the hay!" The cousins rushed over. "Is it Mr. Coff's?" Bess asked excitedly. End of chapter 23.